with that, let me ask you this. So I was talking to Jordan about this yesterday. Had a huge conversation with her dad about guns. And then we were talking about the differences in Jordan and I were talking about the differences in our experiences that inform the way that we view things, right? And from there, I was then started to talk about, I was smoking and I was doing the notes, and so I was just thinking.
Oh, yeah.
So then we started to talk about the education system, and I'm like, this is the problem with this, and people don't know these things, and I was never taught about this. I was specifically talking about the Bill of Rights, those examples of like when I remember learning about the Bill of Rights, it was never delivered to us as this is a limitation on the government. It was this is a list of all your rights are. Like these are the things that the government, it wasn't explicitly this is a list of things the government is not allowed to touch, right? And I think that the context of those things is very important. And then we talked about the different like communist revolutions, in the Soviet Republic and in China. Like we were taught about these things also, but not, I feel, with as good a context as you should, depending on how old you are. When you're 12, it's difficult to lay a lot of those things in. When you're 17,
hard to
18
grasp
in your senior
bit,
year, you can provide a lot more of that context and explain like these are things that could have helped prevent this outside of just people not being pussies and shitty. These are a lot of other things that happened that would have helped dissuade these things from happening. So the question is, you take a look at the education system. If you could redesign the public education system, right, what would it look like? And I can go first if you want a minute to think about that. If you already have an answer, you can go first.
I'll fucking fire off, dude. So assuming that we have to have one, because ideally you would just nuke it.
Right, but this is how we're doing it. We're going to redesign public education to make it how we think is going to be more beneficial.
So
overall.
The first step would be
12.
K through 12.
Yeah.
The first step would be to remove the Department of Education on a federal level.
Okay.
Because the public education system need not have any kind of federal involvement. We could talk about a block grant to every state at the same amount to every state to help fund their own programs, right?
Yeah.
And then you could base it off of population or something like that. I don't know how you do it, but ideally, a good chunk of money goes to the states to help fund things, and then get away from the property tax level of funding for schools, because then poor neighborhoods have bad schools, rich neighborhoods have good schools. Maybe take a mean of the state and then spread that out over the entire state, right? But as far as curriculum goes, teachers are a huge factor in this.
Yeah, because this is more what I was thinking of as curriculum. Like, what are the kids going to be learning at these different levels, right?
We need to have teachers that actually have a fundamentally proper understanding of the founding of the country and what that actually means. You, in your run up to the question, you had the perfect example of these are your rights because the Bill of Rights says you can do this.
Yeah.
And then the government can decide over time through amendments, whatever, to give you more. No, that is wholly wrong. It is 100% wrong. When we talk about the debates later on, there's another example of high-ranking politicians who have a very, very skewed view of the Constitution and how it works anyways. But yeah, all teachers or school districts need to have a full grasp of that. And that needs to start at a very, very young age, and it needs to continue all the way through K through 12. Kids like freedom. Freedom's cool, but you also need to be taught about like discipline, and kids need stuff to do. They want stuff to do. You need to give them tasks to do that. There's a lot of good ways you can teach kids about freedom by giving them organized tasks to do. I mean, I can't come up with anything off the top of my head, but it wouldn't be that hard to figure it out, right?
Right.
But that really, I think, is what it would come down to, is you need public educators to actually have a full understanding of what it actually means, what these rights, where they come from. Difficult to convey at a younger age, easier to convey at an older age.
Yes.
But if you start young with just putting starting to fill the bucket up with a few drops at a time, next thing you know.
What are the two big rules?
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
Don't hurt people, don't take their stuff. Done. Great place to start. Daxman understood that from a very young age.
He was too.
Exactly. He may not understand how to fully live that all the time, because kids are little hellions, and that's what they do.
Yeah, and
but
if
he knows it.
One of the rules, he knows that he's broken one of the rules.
Yes. So you have to instill that. It needs to become a huge part of the curriculum, constant and consistent, all the way up, growing the understanding of it at every other level, and getting into like Thomas Sowell and even like, I mean, you need to find ways to take the text of like John Locke or the founding fathers and understanding their history. History will be a huge part of it. You have to be able to teach history geared towards freedom and liberty.
Right.
You have to teach it like that, not what they did when they did it,
Right.
and then you do it on a test.
Right.
None of that shit, right? That would be my way to do it. It's not that hard. It's one class essentially that could be taught all the way up.
Yeah.
A literal physics or civics class,
Right.
and then history class geared towards a different U.S. history, constant and consistent. World history, a separate class, still required at some level to understand the grand scheme of how things work.
Right.
But U.S. history, constant and consistent from an early age all the way up, building exponentially on the complexities of it throughout. But the problem lies in the fact that teachers will have to teach this stuff, and you need to have the right people in place to do that. That's how you would fix public education.
Right. So I like that answer a lot. And my answer is very similar. Before we go on, Brian, I totally agree. Personal responsibility.
Yes.
And so this is kind of a limited context question, right? It's very limited scope because it's
Joseph.
really like it's like an ideal situation thing. If public school was going to do what we wanted it to do, how would it look? And so I think that's a good answer because it aligns with what he's talking about, right?
Yeah.
So,
and more focus on fundamental, like reading, writing, arithmetic.
Certainly.
Stuff too.
So my answer is very, very similar, right? When I was talking to Jordan about it last night, I said, K through 7, you will obviously be learning the basic things, the math, the reading, the writing, all the shit that we know for a fact, regardless of what career you have, you're gonna definitely do these things in the future. And that's the things that will go into paying your bills and like filing taxes, like small shit. Like these are things that
budgeting, economics,
that you can learn at a young age that don't need to necessarily be this is how you'll pay your bills, but will be easily applicable to that. Right?
Dude, simple math, right? Instead of like the social and emotional learning level where this, that, and the other. Okay, so you go to the grocery. Your mom brings home 6 apples. Cool, I have 6 apples, but remember, the state needs to take their cut of your apples. And so they get 2 of those apples. And now how many apples do you have? I got 4 apples. What happened to your other 2? Oh, the fucking man took them. That's who took your apples.
That's how the question should be phrased.
Yes.
So along with the basic skills, right, up to like K through 7, that social learning that you're doing is all based in the realm of personal freedom, personal responsibility, liberties, like all of these things. And I even wrote it down. We have proven as a family that you can instill these things at a very, very young age.
Yeah.
And
good test case over there.
It will work. Like you said, it doesn't work all the time because they're still a toddler. They're still a child. They still hit people. They still get upset. They don't know how to moderate their emotions.
Yeah. But when he fucks up, he knows what rule he broke.
But they work, right?
Yep.
It works, and you can do it when they're young.
Yes.
Up until about 7th grade or so, when you're like 13, 14 years old, right? At this point,
Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready.